Hello, everyone, and welcome to District 126 Leadership Series, Episode 1. We have had an amazing engagement on the communication series, and now we are up for the leadership terminal. The first episode is all about the first step of leadership that we as Toastmasters take, the club executive committee roles. When we take up these roles, we want to learn many things, but we don't know how these learnings are going to help us in the real-time world. Today, we have somebody who has been a Toastmaster for a decade, who has experienced many of these roles and has turned her learnings into the real-time experience. We have DTM Pratima Madhireddy, who is working into the leadership terminal of a well-known MNC. And let's learn how she has used all of these learnings from these roles to her job and the world outside. Welcome, DTM Pratima, to the session 1 of leadership series. So DTM Pratima, you have been into Toastmasters for such a long time. You would have had so many experiences with how these leadership executive committee roles are performed in the club. What all learnings can we take forward and how we can face the challenges that come in these situations, in these roles. So let us know something about how we can effectively learn from each role and apply that outside. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Pragya. Thank you for the warm welcome and the backstory for the leadership series. Hello, everybody. Greetings of the day. I hope you're all having a lovely new year, and I hope if it is lovely and it remains as lovely throughout the year. Like Pragya mentioned, I've been here almost 10 years. In May this year, I actually finished 1 decade now, and I'm still here, right? And that is testimony to the fact that learning never stops. That is one. The second reason why a lot of seasoned Toastmasters continue to stay in Toastmasters is, over the past decade, I have seen Toastmasters evolve with time. We had a conventional learning program earlier, which changed to adapt to the learning styles of the newer generation that is coming into Toastmasters. Not just that, at the workplace, depending on how the workplace has changed, a lot of the modules that have been brought in for us to be able to align to that demand of the workplace. Now, these changes and the effort that Toastmasters International has put in to be able to adapt to not just the communication leadership demand from the workforce, also the fact that a huge amount of technology has been brought in to ensure that access becomes easy, learning becomes easy, and it also appeals to the newer generation. Now, this is testimony to the fact that this platform is perfect and that learning, as you and I, evolves not just at a Toastmasters International level, but also at an individual level. Now that I've said that, and as to why seasoned Toastmasters continue to stay with the platform, I've always been an advocate that when you put your heart and soul into what you're learning in Toastmasters, every role, every inch of that education manual that you get introduced to has a sure shot application in life, both professional and personal. But a lot of people I know join the platform to accomplish a professional goal more than a personal goal. But at some point, you will realize that you cannot separate the two. Whatever you learn for the sake of a professional outcome becomes a part of you, and it slowly and steadily seeps into how you become as an individual, right? And I'm sure if you're watching this video, you probably already know that there are, executive committee roles that introduce you to leadership apart from the meeting roles. Now, I joined in 2013, and as a new entrant, one of the things that I was surprised with, that my then to be, then president offered me the role of the club secretary. A lot of these roles, you will realize if you take them up, are designed to change you, help you grow in the process of learning. Now, by default at that time, I was somebody who was not very comfortable with leadership. I was not somebody who's coordinated a random group of people to doing single outcome, things. So I was hesitant, but of course, leaders do encourage you, and then that's what Toastmasters is a lot about, which is encourage you to take that step that you would, not take. So yeah, I took that up. As a club secretary, what I realized is the role is defined, right? And each club has its own culture. I was somebody who would do things on my own. I operated on a silos methodology. I was fiercely independent, and I thought that if I roll my sleeves up and start doing, work will get done. I don't have to depend on anybody. But the role is not defined like that. The role says you have to coordinate. You have to coordinate with the sergeant at arms. You have to coordinate with the vice president education. You have to keep the president up to date. You have to maintain records. And this is what the role defined. So slowly and steadily, as I moved out of my own comfort zone, the ability to be able to weave things together, the ability to be able to see how each person's role is connected to the collective success of the club, rather than me just rolling my sleeves and doing, that emerged. But I will also say, and not to mention the fact that as a club secretary, you also write the minutes of the meeting. What happened with me was, one is your own writing style is very individualistic, right? But when you write minutes of the meeting, you know that just like in a speech, there is an audience on the other side who needs to not just read, but also relive the moments. So how descriptive can your language be? At the same time, how crisp can you keep it? How interesting can you keep it? So one of the bigger benefits I had from the role of the club secretary is also my ability to write. Like I said earlier, and I have no doubt today that those abilities of writing a good minutes of the meeting translates into how I write my emails today. Right? I think twice before I write my emails. And I've said this in other forums where I talk about speech writing, that there are always 3 stages to writing something. One is you pre-write, you write, and you rewrite. Right? You will never write it at one go and hit the send button. And I'm very, very crisp in the way I write, which means at a workplace level, I am more likely to get responses faster than somebody else who's probably writing a very elaborate mail. Where in today's world, where people don't have the time to read long mails, they're going to park it aside. So how do you arrive at that point? How do you ensure that your language is crisp? All that is what I translated at a written communication level. At a leadership level, of course, is how do you look at the bigger picture? How do you see how people are connected to each other? And also hold people accountable for the task that they signed up for and make sure that work moves on. So this is at the club secretary level. So I gave you two choices or two learnings. One is communication in terms of writing. One is, of course, leadership. But I don't want at any point for you to separate communication and leadership, because a whole lot of leadership is also on the platform of how you communicate. And there is a certain perspective that you develop when you are communicating as a leader. So these are kind of hand in glove. Try not to separate the two. I must admit at this point that while I've done a lot of roles at the club level, there are certain roles that I did not do. One is I never was the treasurer of the club, or I never played the role of a vice president membership or vice president PR. Because of the strength of the role and the support that I had for the club secretary to the VP, I organically, the following year, went on to become the vice president education. But before I get there, I also want to talk about the role of a treasurer and then talk about, a PR and membership before I move on to VP education. Now, money matters. You will notice that there are two kinds of people who take the role of a treasurer. One, people are extremely good with numbers, And two, people who've not dealt with numbers. When I say numbers here, I actually mean, money. But then that's the beauty of it. In Toastmasters, you might see it in a club meeting level. There are people who take on the role of any role for that matter, does not necessarily mean that they are good at it. They take it up because they want to be good at it. Similarly, leadership roles are designed that way. So if you are, kind of on a fence, should I take the role of a treasurer because I'm not too good with it? Then I would say take it. Because one is there is always that support system of the other 6 members one of them will definitely be good at numbers. And that support system is what will help you learn. And plus here, it is a role that is so strongly defined. The guidelines are so strong and solid that there is really not much scope for you to deviate, right? And if you are from a corporate club, chances are that the system is already in place and you do have somebody in your office who approves the payments and the purchase orders and all of that. So that what you're basically learning is the process versus the numbers. So go ahead. It gives you that edge of understanding who to connect with at a human resource level, at a leadership level, to make sure that your club functions the way it is supposed to function. It is giving you an opportunity to network with somebody outside of your corporate club. Also tell people that, yes, there is a Toastmasters club that is there and we are functioning, and you negotiate funds, it's a negotiation opportunity. If you're in a college institution club, similar, you get to speak to a principal, you get to speak to the accountant in the office. So you're building your network in the process of playing the role of a treasurer, apart from the, collecting the membership fee and paying it out and budgeting, and it is a lot of learning, right? At a club level, if you're from a community club, I won't say it's complex, but it's not as easy as it is with a corporate or an institution, because here there are individual members who will, ask questions. There will individual members who will, there's a certain expectation from you as to how you're going to reduce the financial load of individual member. How are you managing? What kind of a vendor are you bringing in, even for your tea and samosa or snacks that you're bringing in? How much are you saving? Are you considering moving to a better venue? And how are you comparing the cost versus the expense and the choice of that venue? All these are the learnings. How does it translate? It translates into your ability to look at the longer vision of why you're doing what you're doing, right? How do you budget something? How do you negotiate? How do you choose a vendor? Quality check repetitively. We charge members for coming, non-members for coming, guests, we charge them. How are you justifying that budget, right? These learnings will go nowhere. It will absolutely apply to any role that you play at workplace, even at home. If you are calling urban club versus a private vendor, you are going to see as to how much am I paying urban club for the quality of service versus a private vendor who's probably doing as good as a job and is charging less. So money management, right? As well as your network. That is your treasurer. Then we move on to Vice President PR. Well, one of the things I think that is underlying to Toastmasters is the fact that if you're talking to somebody who knows about Toastmasters and what it stands for, you're actually a PR entity in yourself. You're not only doing your own PR, but you're also doing PR for Toastmasters. This is a role in today's world has become slightly more challenging than it was earlier. When I joined Toastmasters, the role of a PR was pretty simple. You have 1 or 2 platforms where we talk about public relations. You talk about your club or Toastmasters. We used to go to other clubs to talk about our club. That was one scope of PR. You were promoting your club. But today, if you look at it, I know my VP PR has his hands full, and if he were not doing what he was doing, I think half the information would just fizzle out into the air. So for the club that I belong to, our VP PR is one of the most active people I've ever seen, and also very savvy in terms of technology, which is what today's VPPR demands, right? So if you're not somebody who's very good with making videos, take the role. If you're not somebody who's very good with design or making a poster, take the role. With the kind of guidelines Toastmasters has today in terms of branding, you see the background that Pragya and I have today is also a guideline that is given. And that is somebody in the VPPR team who's making sure that the Toastmasters branding is consistent, right? But there are guidelines to follow. So when you have guidelines to follow, you know that you can't be random, right? If you are somebody who's not good with Instagram, I mean, I hardly doubt anybody in today's world, youngsters especially, who are not. But someone like me, if I were to take this role, I'm sure I'll up my game in Instagram or Facebook or any other social media for that matter. And it's not just that. How do you promote your club? How do you write those short captions, the catchy ones? So there's always the communication and the language element that comes in how you make these posters, create these posters, aligned to what the branding says. Also, you become the face of your club. So if you are somebody who's going to represent your club or your area at a different area or a division, there is some amount of preparation that you have to do in what you say. The moment you open your mouth, people are looking at, there is a certain expectation as a club leader that you have to fulfill. So in that preparation of making that pitch for your area club, you will put some amount of thought process in your communication. So there is that leadership of networking, making sure you're aligned to the brand, not deviating from the process. And these are all leadership styles. And then there's the communication aspect of, creating that poster, making sure that the language is accurate, the grammar is accurate, and it is catchy and it is appealing. So that's the communication side of it. So this is the VPPR role. So if you are on the fence thinking, should I not? There is never harm in picking up a role. If you're already good at it, you will strengthen it. If you are, if you find it as a challenge with those skills, I guarantee that you will just up your game and there is no looking back after that. So now we come to VP membership. This is another role that I've never played, but I know for a fact that it is one of those pivotal roles, because as club secretary, also as education and president, I know how this role plays into the health of the club. Do you have to be somebody who's very chatty to be a VP membership? Yes and no, right? Yes, because if you're chatty, it makes your task easier to be able to make those connections with the guests as they come into your club. If it is a in-person meeting, or if as they join the Zoom meeting, it ups your game in terms of making that small talk and warming the guest up to the environment of a Toastmasters meeting, right? Whether it's on Zoom or whether it is in person. You are actually the host in many ways, because a lot of them will be directed to you as VP membership to talk about the club, to talk about Toastmasters, and also the critical point of talking about the money on the fees as to why we charge, how much we charge for the learning that we offer. If you're somebody who's not very comfortable with conversations or being chatty with guests, I would say pick this role up, right? Your heart will flutter, your palms will sweat, you will probably even give out wrong information in the beginning. You will probably not know how many members are there worldwide. But the amount of knowledge you gain about Toastmasters, because you have to talk about it and encourage people to join the platform, that itself is a huge plus, right? And like any sergeant at arms, like any role in a meeting, you will see, because you are constantly speaking or making this pitch with the members, your ability, because you get comfortable with the pitch, there's a certain confidence that rises, because you now tell yourself, I know the subject so well. So now what happens is the audience, a lot of times the audiences are strangers, they are not your club members. Because you're so strong with the subject now, the strange audience stop mattering. they're not an area of anxiety for you anymore, because now your strength is in the topic that you're speaking. So I want you to let this sink in. Okay. In any area, look at this outside of Toastmasters, in an office environment. If you are somebody who's extremely good at, coding, technology, or, cybersecurity, if I give you that topic, do you realize how comfortable you become? Then the audience don't matter. But if I say you have a speech project and you have to talk about what Toastmasters defines about mentoring, then your heart will flutter a little, right? But if you were to understand mentoring at Toastmasters, if you were to understand the subject, now, because you have to understand, you have to learn, right? Now, this is the learning, that the moment you know that you are strong with your content, that you're prepared in your head, you know what exactly you have to say or how much you have to say, the audience automatically becomes a friend. You don't have to worry about the audience anymore, right? So that is the biggest learning in Toastmasters. Of course, the role also requires you to make sure that you're bringing in X number of members, every 6 months. That is what adds up to the strategic side of it, right? So you will have your vice president education, your club secretary, your sergeant at arms, your club president, who will coordinate with you and make sure that you are talking about how you're going to bring in those 4 people. Or at the end of a cycle, if you see that people are going to be leaving the club, you got to understand at a membership, as a VP membership, you have to understand what is the story behind why they're leaving, right? And at a executive committee level, if you were to see a pattern as to why people are leaving, it becomes your responsibility to call it out and make sure you strategize to make sure that you're retaining people. Yeah, more like a talent, human resources kind of a role, because Toastmasters International requires you to have certain number of people in the club. So in a gist, this is what it is. So now you have the VP education. VP education, I look at it as more like a strategic role. The club has a DCP points, the distinguished club president points that you have to accomplish. A lot of that strategy lies with the VP education. So when I look at the VP education role, it's more like project management. Only this project, is 1 year long, right? With a very dynamic change in the number of members, active members becoming inactive for a while, inactive members becoming active for a while, members who are only interested in leadership roles and not communication skills, and vice versa. So all these dynamics have to be taken into place. How do you encourage somebody? How do you nudge somebody to, get on that stage and move out of their comfort zone? So one is strategy, to make sure that you are assigning roles, you are assigning speech projects, making sure that you always have the eye on the ball, which is your goal of 10 points at the end of the year, and make sure that you are accomplishing multiple people's education goals. So I look at it as a strategy role, and your ability to manage that project for 1 year long. Outside of that, of course, there is your conversations with mentors. How do you make sure your mentors are working towards the success of each individual member? Do you have mentors who are, have become inactive? Then are you strategizing to make sure that none of your members are left in the lurch because of that? So I look at it as a very strategic role. I don't think I have to call out too much as to how this applies at a workplace. Everything that you do, how do you set your own goals? What kind of conversations are you having with your coaches in terms of your individual growth, right? If you're somebody who's hesitant about saying that this is what I aspire to do, my strength lies in this, and asking your coach to probably give you a project that has those skills, that helps you develop those skills. Those kind of conversations are what come out of the role of a VP education. And that is what you apply in terms of how you chalk your own career path and how you have those conversations with your coaches and leaders to be able to take that path to your own success stories. The role of a president is, looks very, nominal, uh, but to be able to oversee a very typical leadership role. You are not rolling your sleeves and getting your hands dirty, but you always have to look at all of these people, who are in the executive committee, to see constantly if anybody, is, dropping the ball anywhere. Because if one person drops the ball, even if VP membership drops the ball, it impacts. The only thing is it may not impact today, but it'll impact a month down the line. The moment renewals come, you're wondering what happened. Why are we not getting those 4 people? Why are too many people leaving, right? So keeping that focused, being that mentor for all the executive committee roles, that is what the president does. There's a lot of also, conflict management that comes up. Members reach out usually to the president to say, hey, I'm not happy, right? They rarely will go to the VP Ed, or they will rarely go to the VP membership, but they will definitely come to the president and say, well, you are the leader. I mean, what are your folks doing, right? So I won't say conflict, but definitely a lot of, developing the ability to speak for your executive committee, stand for them, understand where the member is coming from. Because like in a typical customer service, no customer will, complain unless there is a problem. So if somebody, a club member, is coming to you and saying something, that means that person has seen the problem. You may not have seen it. So taking that as a feedback in terms of how the executive committee is operating, maybe we are not doing what the members are expecting. That is what the president, has to catch on to and make sure that all of this is done. Now, a lot of times, executive committee roles seem to be in an order. President is the most important role, VP Ed, because the sequence is like that, right? But there is this one role, which people say, oh, it's easy, or, anybody can do it, or, it's not very important. It is easily replaceable, etc., etc. The sergeant at arms. And I consciously bring the sergeant at arms right at the top of the list today, because this person is your is like a linchpin. This person opens the meeting. This person is the one who greets all your guests. This person is the one who collects the money, gives the change, right? This person is also the one who supports the club secretary with the attendance, because this person is keeping tab of how many members have come, how many guests have come. Then that translates into the treasurer understanding how many members are consistent, the VP membership understanding how many members are consistent, how many guests are consistent, right? Also rolls up into how people will come back, because your sergeant at arms is also playing the role of a VP PR. The moment a guest comes in, how warmly this person says hello to the guests who are coming in. So this one person ties into everybody's role just by that, half an hour of standing outside and saying hello to your guests, and also opening the meeting and closing the meeting. This is testimony to the fact that there is no executive committee role that is above the other, more important than the other, or less important than the other, right? They're all designed for a purpose. You choose a role depending on what learning you want to accomplish out of the role. And I always tell people who say, can I take this role? My own mentees sometimes say, oh, ma'am, can I take this role? Can I take that role? I said, the first thing you got to do is download that club leadership handbook, read it, look at what it asks you to do. What are the demands of the role? And then you decide which is the skill that you really want to develop. Being the president doesn't mean anything if you're not going to learn from it. Or any role for that matter will not mean anything if you're not going to learn from it. So that is the learning that makes you a leader, not the title or who you are as an EC, right? So I want to close off by this saying that every role, meeting role, leadership role, is designed for a very categoric learning experience. And the more consciously you apply this learning, the more consciously you will grow. Because you will not leave what you learned at the club level in the club. It is for you to imbibe and apply otherwise. So outside, if somebody looks at you and say, wow, I absolutely love the way you manage that project. Or if somebody says, I'm amazed at how quickly you get to the point, right? If you're receiving a compliment, you can openly say, thanks to Toastmasters, if the time allows it, or you can silently say, thank you, Toastmasters, because that really means that you are taking what you're learning in Toastmasters to outside of Toastmasters, and you're elevating the brand of the platform, which is very, very critical. Right? Wishing you all the best for any role that you pick up. Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished Toastmaster Pratima. So now when we talked about how all these roles add up to our growth and development in the real-time world, there is a point which came up, which was about how conflicts happen in club. And similarly, we do have conflicts when we are working into our personal lives or professional lives. So what do you think if there is a situation wherein a president has to face this kind of a conflict? What kind of a learning or what kind of a skills do we specifically grow in? Recently, I had an example in one of my clubs wherein I work, wherein one of the member wasn't happy with the idea of how the things were going and reached out to the president of the club. Now, this is a situation where you can either be on the EC side or you have to convince the member of what is going wrong. So we always keep getting these kind of conflicts in between. How do these solve and how do this solution help into the real-time world?
So there are two things to this. One is there is a, is the problem very complex is the question you ask yourself. Do you see a pattern? Are multiple people talking about it? Right? Sometimes some people will just say, oh, I don't like it, but it's hard to please everybody, right? But yes, if there are multiple people saying the same thing about the club, then then it's a red flag. That is what you address. If I were the president, if one person comes randomly and says, I didn't like the way we managed time in the meeting today, I don't know if I will spend time solving it or even looking at it as a problem. One-off time you're allowed. But if we know that each time we are missing the time mark for a meeting, or too many people are complaining about not bringing in, let's say, a variety of speakers into the club, or if members are saying that our meetings are monotonous, even if it comes up in the moments of truth, then those are problems that you get down to solve. I won't look at it as a conflict, but look at it as a problem to be solved. Conflict, I will look at, conflict to me is when, there is like two of my executive committee members are not getting along. That would be a conflict. Sometimes that also happens. There are, these cases have been there where, committee members don't get along with each other. And it is quite common because we're all human beings. One is, and everybody, not just the president, and I'm not saying this from the president's point of view. I think when we are in Toastmasters, we got to look at the role as a learning opportunity and not like a individual race in terms of where we are going, where we are going. There is really nothing to it. It is a platform designed for learning. So I think throttling back personal agendas is one learning that we can take from Toastmasters, and it is not easy. Everybody comes with an agenda, everybody has a goal, and if that is being interrupted by something else, you tend to react to it. But if it is conflict, then again, see the pattern, how many times, what is the problem, and is it something that you can solve within? Will it require intervention from anybody else? These are all choices you make depending on what the situation is. But yes, it is a learning, and what you do outside with the same learning is very similar. One, you see a pattern. Do all problems need to be solved? Some problems don't need to be solved. Some just are there. They will come and they will go even before you realize. So Deciding how much energy you want to invest in solving a problem also is a decision-making skill that you have to do, right? And you learn from it that I'm not going to invest my energy in this. Yeah, this is something that I have to invest my energy in. So those kind of learnings you get out of these situations.
That's amazing. Thank you, distinguished Toastmaster Pratima, for all the learnings that you shared, that you've accumulated over these years. I'm sure these are going to help all the members who are planning or not planning to take up any particular role. As you have understood that all executive committee roles hold the same level of importance, the learnings of persuasion, negotiation, conflict management all come handy, which we can apply not only in our professional life, but also in our personal situations. So, as they have beautifully said, that leadership is all about making somebody better than what that person was yesterday and letting them walk on the path they want to. Today, Toastmaster Pratima helped us walk that path better by making us understand how each role can turn up as an opportunity and learning for us. So, here we come towards the end of the first episode of the leadership series, all about club roles. Thank you, DTM Pratima, for joining us today and giving us the pleasure to be here learning all the things right from somebody who has experienced all of it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pragya. All the best to you too.